Divorce sucks, but it doesn't have to define you. You're not alone, and you're not powerless, even when everything feels like it's falling apart. Welcome to The Difficult Divorce, a podcast that cuts through the drama and confusion to give you clarity, confidence, and straight-up real talk. Hosted by Molly Rosenblum, family law attorney, fierce advocate, and the one you want in your corner when it all hits the fan. Each week, we'll break down the legal, the emotional, and the unexpected so you can take back control. Because smart decisions start with straight answers.
Welcome back to The Difficult Divorce. My name is Anthony. I'm your host, and I'm joined here, as always, by family law attorney Molly Rosenblum. And today we're talking about a topic that we hear all the time. What happens if you're divorcing a narcissist? So, Molly, go ahead, take it away.
Hi, Anthony. It's great to be back here, and I will say this carefully because the term gets used a lot. Whether or not there's a formal diagnosis, we see very real patterns of behavior in certain divorces that can make things significantly more difficult. And when you're dealing with a personality that is, for lack of a better word, narcissistic, the normal approach to a divorce does not work.
So what are those patterns? Like, what are you seeing in these cases?
Right. So there are a few that can come up over and over again. Probably the most common pattern we see is control. Someone who wants to maintain control of everything, and everything is about maintaining control. So they want control over the process, control over the narrative, sometimes even control of the other person. The second thing we see with this kind of personality is constant blame shifting. Nothing is ever their fault. There's always a justification for why things are not their fault. Responsibility gets pushed onto someone else, and it's usually their spouse. I'll give you an example. When we see this personality type, we usually see the co-parent being blamed for everything. They didn't get access to school records. They weren't informed about what medical appointments there were. They didn't know they were supposed to bring things to soccer practice. Again, this is common, this constant blame shifting, pushing something onto somebody else. So we do see that a lot with this personality type. And then finally, we see litigation being used as a form of punishment. Unnecessary filings, dragging things out, refusing to cooperate, anything that increases stress, cost, pressure on the other side. And at that point, the divorce stops being about resolution and starts being about leverage.
And, I kind of think that's where people get stuck because they try to handle the situation they would handle like a normal situation.
Exactly. Most people come into divorce thinking, if I'm reasonable, this is going to get settled. And in many cases, and I would say in most cases, that's true. But when you are dealing with someone who is a narcissist or someone who has those tendencies, being reasonable doesn't necessarily mean a resolution quickly in your case because the other party is not operating with the same goal. Their goal is to make things difficult, to control, to push, and your goal may be to de-escalate. Their goal is to escalate, and instead of compromising, they just want to push. And so when that happens, one person is trying to be cooperative, and the other side just takes advantage, and at some point, there becomes a breaking point.
Yeah, I get it. So you're saying that you can't negotiate with someone whose only goal is control. So then if the normal approach doesn't work, it's like you need to switch strategies.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so the normal approach to a divorce doesn't work. So we have to deal with what does. And this is where we have to switch strategies. The first piece is documentation. I always tell my clients who are dealing with this kind of behavior, this kind of personality, you have to document more than a normal case. You need to be clear. You need a consistent record of what is happening. All communications have to be documented in writing, behavior patterns, missed exchanges, because over time that tells a story. And again, it's kind of like we talked about at the beginning. We see this word used a lot, but when you are truly dealing with someone who is a narcissistic personality, you have to tell that story over time, and the only way to do that is documentation. Second, you have to set boundaries. This can be with regard to communication. So keeping things brief, keeping things factual, not engaging in back and forth, name calling, etc. Just straight to the point. Usually tell my clients again, everything in writing, keep it to 2 to 3 sentences at most, and keep it only on the facts. Finally, we want the court to see this behavior. And so a lot of people try to explain what they're dealing with. But again, we see this word thrown around a lot, and courts just don't believe it, or they don't rely on it unless there is a formal diagnosis. And so the court is making decisions on what they can observe and what can be proven. So instead of reacting to every allegation, every issue, the goal is to create a record. Again, that's where documentation comes in. You let the record speak for itself. Let the judge see this is a pattern. This is how this person behaves over a period of time.
I mean, that makes complete sense. I feel like we recently had a case that was very similar, that the messaging and the documentation really, really helped our side of it. So, I mean, besides that, what do you think is one of the biggest mistakes that you see people make during this time?
Yeah, the biggest mistake we see is when people start to get emotional and engage. A lot of times we see people trying to go tit for tat, trying to explain, and that just leads to more conflict. Another opportunity for your narcissistic ex to poke at you, to prod at you, to get a reaction out of you. And again, it's understandable. I mean, these kinds of personalities, they're very, very frustrating. It's very difficult when you feel you're under attack or someone is creating conflict to not respond. But again, to the point, being direct, keeping the facts in line, that is the easiest way to get control of a situation that can often feel uncontrollable. And I do have an example. Recently, my office, we conducted a trial in a case where the parties were ordered to utilize a parenting app, and all of their communication was in a parenting app. And the other side was just constantly provoking my client, constantly sending messages about ridiculous things. The other side had moved to another jurisdiction and would send messages to my client about the mail. You're not forwarding my mail. I want my mail. You're not forwarding my mail. Well, of course, she was in control of her mail, and you could tell that it was just to get a reaction. And finally, my client got to, his statement. It was, I find peace in the truth. And that was just what he would respond with. And ultimately, we did end up trying that case. And I believe ultimately the court did see this person's personality, the other side, and how she was behaving, and recognized that she was the one creating the conflict. I mean, and it wasn't just about the mail. It was about everything. Her items that she had left behind after she moved out. Just little things, why a certain animal, for a stuffed animal for their child, wasn't returned on a trip, and it would just turn into these huge blow-ups. And again, my client just got down to, he would say his response, and then she'd come back with 3 or 4 more messages, and he would just respond with, I find peace in the truth. And that would end the conversation.
Okay, so what do clients need to do moving forward if they're dealing with something similar to that?
Right. So the focus has to shift, again, from reacting in the moment to thinking strategically about how each interaction is going to be viewed later. And that's the real takeaway here. I think when you're dealing with this type of situation, it's not just about getting through the divorce or responding to every allegation. It's about approaching it in a way that protects your position. You need to build your case, understand that's over time, that's through documentation, and allow the court to see what is really happening. And this is where a strategy matters way more than emotion, and the right legal approach can change everything in your case. And again, I'll go back to my client. He did end up winning custody. He ended up winning quite a few of the points of his case. And again, I think that was because we took a very measured, very strategic approach to how he would respond to those communications that were clearly intended to get a reaction.
Right, and that is a good way of looking at it, remembering that all documentation, records, and any act of instigation is being watched by the court constantly. And it can either help or hurt your case dramatically. Just remember, if you're dealing with a situation like this, getting the right guidance early can make a massive difference. Molly, as always, I'd like to thank you for being here on The Difficult Divorce, and remember to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with somebody you think might need it. Thank you for listening to The Difficult Divorce. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to The Difficult Divorce. Follow, review, and share if this helped cut through the noise. Find more tools and real talk on our website at rosenblumlawlv.com. And be sure to tune back in for the next episode. Because in divorce, what you don't know will cost you.